On a brutal winter night, a 17-year-old boy pedaled his battered bike through streets, hurried to finish his last order, just hoping to earn enough for one more night at the boarding house. Suddenly he saw an old woman standing by the bus stop, lost and shivering. He hesitated. This delivery was his last chance to keep his job, but kindness won. He turned back to help her. What he didn't know was that the woman was a billionaire, and that one small act of compassion would change his life forever. Before we dive deeper into the story, tell me, where are you listening from? And don't forget to subscribe so I can share more heartwarming stories with you tomorrow. The wind cut through downtown Austin like a knife made of ice. Winter in Texas could be deceptive. Mild one day, brutal the next. Tonight was brutal. Ethan Bennett, 17 years old and built like a scarecrow, pedaled his battered delivery bike through streets that glistened with ice. His thin jacket, the only one he owned, did almost nothing against the cold that bit through to his bones. His phone buzzed against his thigh. He did not need to look to know what it said. Mr. Rodriguez, his dispatch manager, had been sending the same message every 10 minutes for the past hour. Clock's ticking, Bennett. Don't be late again. Ethan gripped the handlebars tighter, his knuckles going white. The insulated bag strapped to his back held one final order: tacos and queso for someone on South Congress Avenue who had tipped exactly $0. But that order represented more than cold food. It represented his rent. It represented the difference between sleeping in his room tonight or sleeping in a doorway. He checked the time on his phone under a streetlight. It read 7:41 in the evening. He had exactly 19 minutes to make the delivery and clock out before 8. If he was even 10 minutes late, Mr. Rodriguez had made it crystal clear, this would be his third strike. 3 strikes meant no paycheck. No paycheck meant no rent for the tiny room he called home. Ethan had been late twice before. Once because a customer had given him the wrong address. Once because his bike chain had snapped on a hill. Mr. Rodriguez did not care about reasons. He only cared about numbers on a screen. The boy's stomach growled. He could not remember the last time he had eaten. Yesterday's breakfast, the day before. Time blurred when you were hungry. He had been living on free crackers from the convenience store where he sometimes bought his manager's cigarettes, hoping the old man behind the counter would take pity on him. Ethan had been good at school once. Better than good, he had been exceptional. His teachers at Travis High School had called him gifted. They had talked about scholarships, about the University of Texas, about a future that looked nothing like this frozen street. He had aced his advanced placement classes, scored in the 99th percentile on practice SATs, and had been planning to study pre-med. But that was before his mother got sick. Before the hospital bills piled up like snow against a door. Before he had to choose between calculus homework and her medicine. He had deferred his senior year just temporarily, he had told himself. Just until things got better. His mother had died anyway. 16 months ago, on a Tuesday morning while he had been at the grocery store buying her prescriptions. The store clerk had handed him his phone when the hospital called. He had known before they said a word. He had felt it in his chest. Now he was alone. He touched the small silver necklace beneath his collar, a simple pendant, smooth and marked, carved by hand, that had belonged to his mother. She had worn it since she was a child, the only thing she had left from before she was found and adopted. The metal was cold against his skin, but the memory behind it was warm. Completely, utterly alone in a city that did not care whether he lived or died, but he was still here. Still pedaling, still trying. The streetlights cast long shadows across the icy pavement. Ethan navigated around a patch of black ice, his back tire sliding slightly before catching traction. His phone buzzed again. He did not look. "I'm coming," he muttered to the empty street. "I'm coming." He turned onto 6th Street, taking a shortcut he knew would shave off 3 minutes. The bike's gears ground and clicked. They needed oil he could not afford. Everything about his life needed something he could not afford. That was when he saw her. At first Ethan thought she was a pile of old clothes someone had abandoned near the rusted bus shelter. Austin was full of forgotten things. But then the pile moved, and he realized it was a person, an elderly woman, thin as a wire hanger, wrapped in a coat that looked like it had been pulled from a donation bin 30 years ago. She was standing, barely, one hand gripping the shelter's pole, the other clutching a small handbag to her chest. Her shoes were the kind women wore to church in the 1950s, leather with a small heel, and they were cracked and soaked through from the slush. Ethan pedaled past. He had to. 7:43. 17 minutes left, but something made him look back. The old woman was swaying slightly, like a tree about to fall. Her lips were moving, talking to herself maybe, or praying. Her face, what he could see of it under a thin scarf, was the color of old paper. Ethan's mother's voice rose up in his memory, as clear as if she were sitting on the handlebars. "Baby, if you ever see someone alone like that, you stop, you hear me? You stop." His mother had been a nurse before she got sick. She had believed in stopping. She had believed in helping. She had believed in a lot of things that had gotten her exactly nowhere except an early grave. "I can't," Ethan whispered to the memory. "Mama, I can't," but his hands were already squeezing the brakes. The bike skidded slightly on the ice before coming to a stop. He checked the time on his phone. 7:44. 16 minutes. Then he looked back at the old woman, who had now slumped against the pole, her eyes closed. "Damn it," he breathed. Ethan turned the bike around. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. Up close she looked even more fragile. Her hands were gnarled with arthritis, her breathing shallow and rapid. She opened her eyes when his bike tire crunched over some broken glass. "Ma'am," Ethan said softly, "are you okay?" She blinked at him, confusion swimming in her pale blue eyes. "The bus," she said, her voice thin as tissue paper. "I'm waiting for the bus." "Which bus?" Ethan asked, though part of him was screaming to get back on the bike, to go, to finish the delivery. "The 47, she said. "To Cedar Park. My house is on Limestone Trail. Do you know it?" Ethan felt something cold settle in his stomach that had nothing to do with the weather. Cedar Park was on the far northern edge of the metro area, nearly 15 miles away. And the number 47 bus, "Ma'am, the 47 doesn't run anymore. They canceled that route 4 years ago during the budget cuts." She stared at him. "That can't be right." "I'm sorry, but it is." He pulled out his phone, showed her the transit app. "See, no more 47. Her face crumpled. For a moment he thought she might cry, but she pulled herself together with visible effort. "I must have forgotten," she said quietly. "I forget things now. Do you have someone you can call, someone who can pick you up?" She fumbled with her handbag, pulled out an ancient flip phone. The screen was cracked. She stared at it for a long moment. "I'm not sure how to work this. My daughter usually, but she's away. Or maybe she moved. I can't remember." Ethan checked the time again. 7:47. 13 minutes. He should call someone. A taxi. The police maybe. Someone. But even as he thought it, he knew it was pointless. A taxi to Cedar Park would cost $40, maybe $50. The cops would take hours to respond to a non-emergency. And this woman looked like she might not survive hours. "Where did you say you lived?" he heard himself ask. "Limestone Trail. Number 214. It's a yellow house, or maybe it's tan now. I painted it once, but that was..." She trailed off, lost in some memory. Ethan looked down at his delivery bag. Then at the time on his phone. Then at the old woman, whose lips had gone slightly blue. His mother's voice again. "You stop, baby. You always stop." "Okay," Ethan said, and he wasn't sure whether he was answering his mother or the old woman or some part of himself. "I'll take you." "You will?" "Yes, ma'am. But I don't have a car, just this bike. Do you think you could sit on the back? On the cargo rack?" She looked at the bike like he had suggested she ride a dragon. "I haven't done anything like that since I was a girl. I'll go slow, I promise, and it's too cold to wait for another option." The old woman considered this. Then with surprising decisiveness, she nodded. "My name is Dorothy. Dorothy Whitfield." "Ethan Bennett." "Ma'am, let's get you home." Getting Dorothy onto the cargo rack took 5 minutes they did not have. She weighed almost nothing, but her legs would not cooperate, and Ethan had to brace the bike with one foot while helping her settle onto the metal bars. He wrapped his only blanket, a threadbare thing he used to cover deliveries, around her shoulders. "Hold on to my waist," he told her. "Tight as you can." Her grip was surprisingly strong. Ethan checked his phone one last time before they started. 8 messages from Mr. Rodriguez. The last one read, That's it, Bennett. You're done. He turned the phone off and started pedaling. The wind fought them every inch of the way. What would have been a 30-minute ride in good weather became an odyssey in the freezing February night. Ethan's legs burned. His lungs felt like they were full of broken glass, but he kept pedaling. Dorothy did not complain once. She held on, her face pressed against his back, occasionally giving directions in her thin, wavering voice. North on Lamar, right after the old Randalls. It used to be called something else, or maybe that was another store. I can't keep them straight anymore. They talked because staying silent would have meant thinking too hard about what Ethan had just done. Do you have family? Dorothy asked suddenly. Not anymore, Ethan said. My mom died last year. My dad left when I was 5. There's nobody else. Oh, that's sad. Her words came slowly, uncertain. I think I had a daughter once, or a niece. No, a daughter. Patricia, smart as a whip, wanted to be a teacher. What happened to her? Dorothy frowned, her breath misting in the air. She went away, or maybe she passed. 9 years. 10? Breast cancer, I think. Yes, that sounds right. She sighed. Everything good goes away, doesn't it? Ethan did not know how to answer, so he just kept pedaling. They passed through neighborhoods that grew quieter and darker. Houses stood larger and farther apart. The streetlights thinned out. Ethan's phone, still off, lay silent in his pocket. He tried not to think about the consequences waiting for him. The eviction notice likely taped to his door, the job he no longer had, the complete and utter collapse of the fragile life he had been barely maintaining. His mother's voice kept him going. You did the right thing, baby. You always do the right thing. But the right thing was not keeping him warm. The right thing was not paying his rent. They stopped once, at a closed Stripes gas station with ancient vending machines outside. Ethan used the last $6.50 in his pocket to buy 2 hot chocolates from a machine that looked older than the internet. The drinks were barely warm and tasted like chemicals, but they helped. Dorothy insisted he drink first. You're doing all the work, she said. You're doing the holding on, Ethan replied. They shared the hot chocolate in the cold, under a flickering fluorescent light that buzzed like an angry wasp. For a moment, Ethan felt something he had not felt in months, a connection to another human being. A reminder that he was not completely alone. Why are you doing this? Dorothy asked suddenly. You don't know me. You have somewhere to be, don't you? I can tell. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. She reminded him of his mother in those last weeks, fragile, lost, but still fighting to maintain dignity. My mama taught me to stop, he said simply. Dorothy nodded slowly, as if half hearing him. Good woman, she murmured. My mother used to say that too, or maybe it was my sister. Hard to remember. They got back on the bike. Ethan's legs screamed in protest, but he pushed through the pain. They had miles to go yet. It was 9:17 when they finally turned onto Limestone Trail. The houses here were older, larger, set back from the street behind gates and long driveways. Dorothy directed him in a fragile, wavering voice. Left here, no right, no yes, this way. It's home, I think. Stone house, with the lights, or maybe that was before. Ethan helped her down from the bike. Her legs nearly gave out, and he had to support her weight as they walked up the driveway. Before they reached the door, it flew open, and a woman in her 50s appeared, her face a mixture of relief and fury. Mother, where have you been? I've been calling the police, the hospitals. This young man brought me home, Dorothy said, her tone unexpectedly clear. From the bus stop, the woman, Sharon, turned her attention to Ethan. Confusion, suspicion, then gratitude, crossed her face. The bus stop. That's 12 miles from here. How did you? I gave her a ride, Ethan said. On my bike. Sharon stared at him, then at the battered delivery bike. You rode my mother 12 miles on that? In this weather? Yes, ma'am. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Dorothy said softly, half to herself, he's a good boy, Sharon. Patricia would have liked him. Or was it Anna? I can't. Oh, never mind. Sharon's face softened slightly at the name. Come inside, she said to Ethan. Both of you. It's freezing. I can't, Ethan said. I should get back. Nonsense, you look half frozen yourself. At least come in for a moment. Warm up, I insist. But Ethan was already backing toward his bike. He did not want pity, he did not want charity. He had done what he needed to do, and now he needed to face whatever consequences waited for him in his own life. Wait, Dorothy said, fumbling in her purse. She pulled out a crumpled receipt and a pen. Her hand shook as she wrote. My number, I think this is it. Or maybe it's the old one. Call me. Please, I want to thank you properly. Ethan took the paper, though he knew he would probably lose it or throw it away. You don't need to thank me, ma'am. I'm just glad you got home safe. Dorothy's cloudy eyes cleared for an instant. You did more than you know, she said. You really did. He rode away before they could stop him again, his legs protesting every rotation of the pedals. Behind him he heard Sharon's voice floating through the cold air. Who was that kid? Ethan did not hear Dorothy's answer. He was already disappearing into the darkness, pedaling toward whatever disaster awaited him. Ethan arrived back at his rooming house near Riverside at 10:23. He knew immediately that something was wrong. His belongings, 2 trash bags full of clothes, a backpack with his school books, a box of his mother's things, sat on the sidewalk, already dusted with fresh sleet. His key didn't work in the door. A notice was taped to the wood, rent overdue, locks changed. Call by Monday or possessions will be disposed of. Ethan stood there for a long moment, his breath making white clouds in the freezing air. Then he sat down on the steps, and put his head in his hands. He didn't cry, he was too tired to cry. Too cold, too empty. The door opened behind him. Barnes, the landlord, stood there in his bathrobe, his face hard. You got my note? Yes, sir. Rent was due Tuesday. It's Friday night. I know I was going to pay tomorrow. I just needed. I don't care what you needed. Rules are rules. You've got until Monday morning to come up with what you owe plus late fees, or your stuff goes to the curb. Can I at least? No. Mr. Barnes stepped back and shut the door. Ethan heard the deadbolt slide home. He sat there until the cold forced him to move. Then he gathered his trash bags and backpack and walked his bike to the all-night convenience store 8 blocks away. The place was called Quick Stop, though Ethan had never felt particularly quick there. It was run by an old man named Walter, who sat behind bulletproof glass reading paperback westerns. A younger guy named Tyler worked nights, and Tyler had never looked at Ethan with anything but suspicion. Ethan pushed through the door, the bell jingling cheerfully. Tyler looked up from his phone, his expression immediately souring. We're not a homeless shelter, Tyler said. I know. Ethan gestured helplessly at his bags. Can I just stay for an hour, until I figure out where to go? Buy something or leave? Ethan didn't have any money left. He'd spent his last few dollars on hot chocolate for Dorothy. I don't have. Then get out. Walter looked up from his book. He was somewhere in his 70s, white-haired and weathered as old leather. He studied Ethan through the glass, the delivery bag, the frost on his sleeves, the hollow exhaustion in his eyes. You're that delivery kid, he said after a long moment. Bennett, right? You drop food here sometimes. Yes, sir. Walter nodded slowly. You remind me of myself a long time ago. Out too late, working too hard, nobody waiting at home. Tyler rolled his eyes. That's his problem, not ours. Walter closed his book. That's exactly what someone once said to me. Then he turned to Ethan. There's a cot in the storage room. It's not much, but it's warm. You can sleep there tonight if you need to. Ethan blinked. You'd really let me? One night, Walter said simply. Just don't steal my coffee pot. It was half a joke, half a warning. But it made Ethan smile weakly. Thank you, he said. Walter disappeared into the back for a moment and returned with a small packet of instant noodles. Boil some water in the break room. Eat before you sleep, you'll think straighter in the morning. Tyler muttered. You're too soft, old man. But Walter ignored him. That night, Ethan curled up on the narrow cot in the storage room. The air smelled of dust and cardboard, but it was warm. He pulled his mother's photo from his backpack and held it close. I'm trying, Mama, he whispered. Outside, the neon sign buzzed faintly against the frosted glass. He fell asleep to the hum of the refrigerators, dreaming of Dorothy on the back of his bike, her trembling hands gripping his waist, her voice saying, "You did more than you know." He woke to someone shaking his shoulder. Morning light filtered through the narrow window. Walter stood over him, holding 2 styrofoam cups of coffee. "Morning, son. Figured you could use something hot." Ethan sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. "Thank you, and for letting me stay." "You needed a roof," Walter said. "I've been where you are, no shame in it." Ethan looked around the cluttered storage room, the boxes stacked to the ceiling, the shelves coated in dust. "Let me help clean this up before I go," he said. "It's the least I can do." Walter gave a small smile. "If it makes you feel better, sure, just don't overdo it." He left Ethan to it. By mid-morning, the quick stop smelled faintly of old coffee and dust. Ethan had been stacking boxes in the storage room for nearly an hour, trying to ignore the sting in his fingers. The work was mindless, but it gave him something to focus on besides the question that had been circling in his head since dawn. What now? Walter had gone out front to restock shelves. Tyler stood behind the counter, watching him through the open door with the patience of a cat eyeing a mouse. When Walter stepped out to meet a delivery driver, the bell above the door chimed, then fell silent. A few minutes later, Tyler's voice came sharp from the front. "Walter, we've got a problem." Walter came back inside, brushing sleet from his coat. "What kind of problem?" $20 is missing from the register," Tyler said. His tone was tight, rehearsed. "I counted before you left, now it's gone." Walter frowned. "Maybe you miscounted." "I didn't. And you know who's been in here all morning." Ethan froze. He could feel the blood drain from his face. Walter's eyes flicked toward him, uncertain but not accusing. "You saying the kid took it?" "I'm saying the math doesn't lie," Tyler said. "You really think someone sleeping in our back room for free wouldn't pocket a few bills while you weren't looking?" The words hit like a slap. Ethan felt heat rise behind his eyes. "I didn't take anything." "Then prove it," Tyler said. "Empty your pockets." "Tyler," Walter warned, "don't start this. If he's clean, then what's the problem?" Ethan's hands trembled as he turned out his pockets. Lint. The old receipt Dorothy had written her number on. His dead phone. Nothing else. Tyler wasn't satisfied. "His bag," he said. "Check his bag." Ethan swallowed hard, then unzipped the backpack and dumped it on the counter. Battered textbooks, a cracked glasses case, a photo of his mother and him, a faded acceptance letter from UT Austin. His whole life, laid bare and worthless on the counter. "That's everything," he said quietly. Walter looked down at the pile, then at Ethan. His voice softened. "That's enough." "No," Tyler snapped. "Money doesn't just disappear. You want to believe a sob story, go ahead. But don't make me the fool here." He turned toward the small security monitor, mounted behind the counter, the one that displayed the grainy feed from the store's corner camera. "I'll pull the footage. You forget. I've got it on my phone." Ethan felt his stomach turn. He'd noticed the monitor when he came in. It only showed the front half of the store, not the register. A small second lens hung above the counter, half covered by a faded sticker that read "out of order." Tyler had probably stopped noticing it years ago. Tyler scrolled through the feed, muttering under his breath. The faint light from his screen flickered across his face. Nothing. Just me and the kid working, must have stepped out of frame. He looked up triumphant. "So what now? You still think he's innocent?" Walter's expression didn't change. "You're right," he said evenly. "The main camera's been broken for a while, but there's another one you might have forgotten about." Tyler blinked. "What?" Walter reached under the counter and pressed a small button on the monitor's base. The faded out of order light above the screen flicked once, then went dark as a new feed appeared, clearer, tighter, directly over the register. The footage rolled back automatically. There it was, Tyler alone, glancing toward the door, sliding open the till, slipping a 20 into his pocket, before strolling casually away. Walter didn't raise his voice. Guess the old thing wasn't so out of order after all. The silence that followed was suffocating. Tyler's face went from red to pale in seconds. That's old footage. Could be anything." "It's time-stamped," Walter said quietly. 10 minutes ago." The register dinged as he opened it. He took out a single 20, laid it gently on the counter beside the open backpack, and said, "That's the one you were missing, I think." For a moment, Tyler just stood there, cornered by his own arrogance. Then he muttered something, half curse, half plea, and grabbed his jacket. Get out, Walter said, not raising his voice. Before I call someone who'll make this official. The door slammed hard enough to shake the shelves. The sound echoed through the narrow store until all that was left was the hum of the refrigerators. Ethan stared down at the 20. He couldn't seem to breathe. Walter sighed and rubbed a hand over his face. You didn't deserve that, son. It's fine, Ethan said softly, though his throat burned. No, it's not. Walter's voice was low, weary. You remind me of a time I couldn't catch a break either. People looked at me the same way, like I'd already done something wrong. He pulled 2 bills from the till and pressed them into Ethan's hand. For the trouble. And for the work, you earned it. Ethan shook his head. I don't want, it's not charity, it's payment, Walter said firmly. Then gentler, and there's a cot in back if you need it again tonight. Ethan looked at him, confused. Why are you being so kind to me? Walter's mouth twitched into something like a smile. Because someone once was kind to me, when I didn't deserve it. And I've been trying to return the favor ever since. Something in Ethan cracked, just a little, like ice thawing. He nodded, unable to speak. That night he lay on the cot again, staring up at the ceiling. The buzz of the neon sign filtered through the thin wall, and he thought about Dorothy, about Walter, about how one small act of compassion could ripple through a life like a pebble in still water. He fell asleep, clutching his mother's photograph. And in his dream, Dorothy's voice whispered through the wind. You did more than you know. He woke to someone shaking his shoulder. The night passed in uneasy silence. The hum of the refrigerators was the only heartbeat of the quick stop. Ethan slept fitfully, the blanket thin, the air heavy with the smell of cardboard and oil. Outside, the sleet softened to rain, then froze again before dawn. When the first gray light crept through the cracks of the blinds, he dreamed of his mother's voice whispering, You did more than you know. And then someone shook his shoulder. Ethan Bennett. He blinked awake, startled. For a moment, he thought he was still dreaming. Then the blur of sleep cleared, and he recognized the face, older, composed, the same one he'd glimpsed in the porch light 2 nights ago. You're Mrs. Whitfield's daughter, he said quietly. We met the other night. That's right, she said, voice calm but purposeful. Sharon Whitfield. The single bulb threw a pale light over her coat and tired face. She looked like she hadn't slept either. How did you find me? He asked. You left my mother a receipt with a phone number. It led to your delivery service. They weren't eager to cooperate, but I can be persuasive. A faint tired smile crossed her face. Your landlord said you'd been evicted. The man at the counter told me you were here. Ethan rubbed his face. What time is it? 6:30. He hesitated. Is your mother all right? She's been asking for you since dawn. Sharon said softly. She says there's something she needs to tell you. She's lucid this morning. Really lucid? That doesn't happen often. Ethan looked at the $40 folded neatly beside his backpack. I don't think I should, please. The word carried quiet urgency. Just come. She won't settle until she's spoken to you. Ethan stared at the floor for a moment, then nodded. All right, ma'am. I'll come. The drive to Cedar Park was quiet except for the rain ticking against the windshield. Sharon's car smelled faintly of leather and lavender. Ethan watched the streets glide past, people hurrying to work, the city shaking off sleep. He wondered how many of them knew how lucky they were just to have a place to be. The Whitfield house looked even larger in daylight, warm light spilling from its tall windows, like a world that didn't belong to him. A woman in scrubs opened the door as they arrived. She's waiting, the nurse said. In the sunroom, Dorothy sat in a wicker chair near the window, a blanket across her knees. Morning light softened the lines in her face. When she saw Ethan, her eyes brightened with recognition. There you are, she said warmly. I was afraid you wouldn't come. Yes, ma'am, Ethan murmured. Thank you for inviting me. Come sit, dear. She gestured toward the chair opposite. Sharon, give us a moment, will you? Sharon nodded and stepped out, closing the door quietly behind her. Dorothy studied him as he sat, thin shoulders drawn in, hands folded neatly, careful not to disturb the stillness of the room. You look worn out, she said gently. Didn't you sleep? A little, ma'am. Because of me? No, ma'am, just a lot on my mind. Dorothy's tone softened. You helped me that night. Most people wouldn't have stopped. You needed help, Ethan murmured. I just did what anyone should, and lost your job for it, she said quietly. He gave a small shrug. It's all right, jobs come and go. Dorothy leaned forward, her gaze steady. Why did you stop, Ethan? Be honest. Ethan hesitated, voice low. My mother always said you don't ride past someone who looks like they've been forgotten. She had this friend, Miss Carroll, who got sick years ago. Nobody visited her anymore, so my mom would stop by after work, even when she was dead tired. She said kindness didn't need to be convenient to matter. He paused, a faint memory brushed past, his mother's hand on his hair, the scent of antiseptic clinging to her sleeve, the soft hum she made when she was too tired to talk. When I saw you there that night, he said quietly. I thought about her. I couldn't just leave. Dorothy smiled, fragile but genuine. Your mother sounds like someone I would have liked to know. She would have liked you too, Ethan said softly. You remind me of her in some ways. The quiet that followed wasn't awkward, it felt shared, understood. Then Dorothy reached for a folder beside her. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her voice stayed calm. I asked Sharon to learn a little about you. I hope you don't mind. No ma'am. You're 17. You were an excellent student, top marks, advanced classes, scholarship recommendations. You left school to care for your mother. After she passed, you've been doing your best to get by. Ethan nodded faintly. I just did what I had to. And now, Dorothy said gently, you can do something more. You can stay here. Ethan looked up, startled. Stay here. Yes, this house has too many empty rooms and not enough laughter. You can have one, finish school, get back on your feet. If you'll let me help. He shook his head quickly, flustered. That's thank you ma'am, truly, but I couldn't. I didn't do enough to deserve something like that. Dorothy smiled, weary but radiant. You did exactly enough. You stopped. Ethan looked down, his throat tight. I just did what she would have wanted me to. Dorothy nodded softly, and that's why it matters. She looked down at the folder beside her, fingertips brushing its edge. I've been thinking, I want to start something. A foundation. To help young people like you, those who are trying but invisible. I can fund it, but I need someone who understands what it means to be on the edge. Someone honest. Someone kind. Ethan shook his head slightly, voice barely above a whisper. I don't think I'm the right person ma'am. I've never done anything important. Kindness is important, Dorothy said. And you have that. You'll learn the rest. He hesitated. Why me? Dorothy's gaze softened, distant. Because you remind me of someone I once knew. My closest friend, long ago. She had your eyes, the same way of seeing the good in people, even when the world gave her no reason to. She passed years ago, but she used to say the same thing you just did. Kindness doesn't have to be convenient. Ethan's eyes stung. He swallowed hard, unable to meet her gaze. I don't know what to say. Then don't, Dorothy said kindly. Just think about it. You don't have to decide today. After a moment, Ethan nodded, his voice unsteady. If you really think I can help, ma'am, I'd like to try. Dorothy's smile deepened. I know you can. She reached out, her frail hand warm against his. Welcome home, Ethan Bennett. Ethan left the Whitfield house that afternoon, with a strange quiet in his chest. The air smelled of wet cedar and new beginnings. Before he did anything else, he took the bus back toward Riverside. The Quick Stop's neon sign buzzed weakly against the gray sky. Walter was there as always, behind the counter with his paperback western. When the bell jingled, he looked up. Kid, Walter said, eyes crinkling. Didn't expect to see you again so soon. Ethan smiled, a little shy. I just wanted to say thank you, for last night, for letting me stay, for believing me when you didn't have to. Did things work out? Ethan nodded, better than I ever thought they could. Walter studied him for a moment, then gave a small knowing grin. Good. Sometimes the world surprises us. Huh? Ethan helped straighten a few boxes near the counter, more out of gratitude than duty, then shouldered his worn backpack. You were right, Mr. Walter. Sometimes being kind really does come back around. Keep paying it forward, son. Ethan smiled again, the kind that hurt in his chest, because it felt real. Then he walked back out into the cold. His few possessions fit easily into the battered backpack. He held the small silver necklace, his mother's, tight in his palm, as he waited for the bus back to Cedar Park. The metal was cold, but the memory it carried was warm. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt like the road ahead wasn't just survival, it was possibility. He watched the skyline shrink behind him, whispering under his breath, "I'll make it matter, Mama." The first 3 months were the happiest Ethan had known since before his mother got sick. He had his own room, a beautiful space with a real bed, a desk, bookshelves and windows that looked out over the hill country landscape. Dorothy hired tutors, and Ethan threw himself back into his studies with desperate intensity. It felt like coming back to life after drowning. At first, the lessons were harder than he'd expected. Numbers that once came easily now slipped away, and sentences tangled when he tried to read aloud. His hands cramped from writing, his mind, unused to stillness, kept wandering to worries he could no longer fix. There were days when he wanted to give up, to tell Dorothy he wasn't the person she thought he was. But every morning, she asked what he'd learned, and every evening she listened to his halting answers as though they mattered. "Mistakes mean you're trying," she said once, when he grew frustrated over a failed test. Sharon, who had been silent at first, began leaving small notes in the margins of his worksheets. "Good start, try again here." Slowly the noise in his head quieted. He began to see patterns again, the logic behind an equation, the rhythm inside a sentence. When his first quiz came back with more checkmarks than red lines, Dorothy smiled and said, "That's what progress looks like." Ethan didn't know whether she meant the paper or him. The Lone Star Light Foundation took shape slowly. Dorothy's lucid days were unpredictable, but on her good days, she was sharp as ever. Together, they drafted mission statements, researched similar organizations, and planned how to identify young people who needed help. Sharon remained cautious at first, watching Ethan with quiet reserve, not out of mistrust, but from habit. She had spent years protecting her mother from confusion, from strangers, from the world's unkindness. Yet the longer she watched him, his patience with Dorothy, his quiet way of listening instead of talking, the more that reserve softened into trust, and then into something gentler, almost like affection. "She's happier," Sharon admitted one evening in May. They were sitting in the kitchen, Ethan doing calculus homework, while Sharon worked on her laptop. "I haven't seen her this engaged in years." "She's an amazing woman," Ethan said. "She is, and so was Patricia." Sharon closed her laptop. "You should know, you do remind her of Patricia. Not in looks but in spirit. The way you think, the questions you ask. She loved my sister more than anything in the world. When Patricia died, part of Mom died too. I'm not trying to replace her. I know, but you're giving her something back. Purpose, hope, that's a gift." Sharon paused. "I'm sorry I was so suspicious of you at first. You were protecting your mother, I get it. Still, I was wrong about you." In late June, everything changed. The story had leaked somehow. A local reporter caught wind of Ethan's situation, and Dorothy's generosity. She showed up at the door asking for interviews. Ethan refused, but the reporter published a story anyway. Homeless teen finds home with elderly heiress. At first the response was positive, feel-good comments, shares, likes. But then the tide turned. Someone dug up Ethan's eviction. Someone else found photos of him looking rough and homeless. The narrative shifted. He wasn't a good kid who'd helped someone in need. He was a con artist. A manipulator. A gold digger preying on a vulnerable old woman. The comments section became vicious. "This kid is clearly scamming her. Someone check on this woman. She's being taken advantage of. Where's Adult Protective Services?" He probably planned the whole thing. Ethan tried to ignore it, but it was everywhere. Someone created a hashtag #SaveDorothy. There were think pieces about elder abuse. Reddit threads dissecting every detail of his life. Then Tyler, fired from Quickstop, apparently nursing a grudge, posted a video. It was edited cleverly, making it look like Ethan had been the one caught stealing. This is who Dorothy Whitfield is trusting with her money.
Tyler wrote, "A thief. I have proof." The video went viral. Ethan stopped going outside. He stopped looking at his phone. He threw himself into his studies and tried to pretend the world outside didn't exist. Dorothy, in one of her clear moments, found him sitting alone in the garden. "Let them talk," she said simply. "The truth is what we know, let them believe whatever they want." But the attacks escalated. Someone spray-painted "con artist" on the fence. Someone else sent threatening emails. Sharon hired security. Then on a humid Monday in July, salvation came from an unexpected source. Walter, the old man from Quick Stop, posted his own video. It showed clear footage of Tyler pocketing money from the register. "I've been silent because I hoped this would blow over," Walter's caption read. "But I won't let a good kid's reputation be destroyed by a liar." Here's the truth about Ethan Bennett. He's honest, hard-working and kind. Tyler is the thief, not Ethan. The video spread as fast as Tyler's had. The narrative shifted again, this time in Ethan's favor. News outlets picked it up. The comments sections filled with apologies and praise. But the damage had been done. Ethan felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he'd never felt before. Dorothy noticed. "This is the price of doing good publicly," she told him. "People want to tear down what they don't understand. But we're not doing this for them. We're doing it because it matters." "Maybe I should leave," Ethan said quietly. "Let things calm down." "Absolutely not. You're family now. Family doesn't abandon each other when things get hard." The foundation officially launched in September. They hosted a small event, nothing fancy, just Dorothy, Ethan, Sharon, and a handful of other supporters at a community center in Round Rock. Dorothy gave a short speech about Patricia, about loss, about the importance of helping young people find their way. Ethan stood beside her, uncomfortable in a borrowed suit, but proud. When the applause faded, Dorothy reached for his hand. "You look just like her," she murmured. "Like who?" Ethan asked, but she only smiled vaguely, the thought already slipping away. By December they'd helped 9 young people, kids like Ethan who'd fallen through the cracks. They provided housing assistance, tutoring, job training, whatever was needed. Dorothy's health was declining visibly now. The lucid days were fewer, but she smiled whenever Ethan was near. One afternoon, while Ethan was helping her button her cardigan, the small silver pendant slipped from under his collar. Dorothy's hand froze midair. "That necklace," she whispered. Ethan looked down. "It was my mother's. She said she'd had it since she was little." Dorothy reached out, her trembling fingers brushing the charm's smooth face. "Where did she get it?" "She never said much," Ethan murmured. "Only that it was the one thing she kept from before she was adopted." Dorothy's eyes widened, the fog lifting for the first time in weeks. "Adopted? Anna?" Her voice shook. "Anna Evelyn Bennett? My mother's name was Anna," Ethan said slowly. "But she never used a middle name." Dorothy's breath caught. "Then it's true," she whispered. "That necklace, it belonged to Evelyn's little girl. Evelyn Whitfield, my best friend in all the world. We grew up together, raised our families side by side. When the hurricane hit, she and her husband were lost in the flood. Their baby girl vanished in the evacuation. We searched for years." Her eyes filled. "I thought she was gone forever." Sharon, drawn by her mother's raised voice, appeared in the doorway. "Mom?" Dorothy turned to her, tears bright in her faded eyes. "Sharon, the necklace, it's Evelyn's. Don't you see? This boy's mother was Evelyn's daughter. Her little Anna, her family." Sharon stared at the pendant, her voice barely above a whisper. "That can't be." But Dorothy only smiled through her tears. "She made 2 of them before she left, one for herself, one for her baby. I remember watching her carve the mark on the back." Sharon's hand went to her mouth. "So Ethan, he's not a stranger," Dorothy said softly. "He's family, what's left of Evelyn's line." When Dorothy drifted back into sleep, Sharon led Ethan to the kitchen. She poured tea neither of them drank. Sharon led Ethan into the kitchen. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, Sharon said quietly, "Mom always talked about Evelyn Whitfield. She told me stories about her every week. How they used to volunteer together, how Evelyn used to braid her hair before dances. I thought it was just dementia. She'd call out for Evelyn in her sleep." She looked at Ethan, eyes wet.
I never imagined you'd walk in carrying her granddaughter's necklace. Ethan traced the pendant with his thumb. My mother never knew where it came from. She said it was her first memory, someone pressing it into her hand before everything went dark. Sharon smiled faintly. Then I guess some part of Evelyn kept her promise. She always told Mom, if anything happens I'll make sure you're never alone. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You didn't just save her life that night, Ethan, you brought her best friend home. For a long time neither of them spoke. The rain tapped softly against the windows and somewhere down the hall Dorothy murmured Evelyn's name again in her sleep. Sharon rose and checked on her mother, then returned with a small tired smile. She's peaceful, Sharon whispered. It's like she's finally stopped searching. Ethan looked toward the doorway, where the lamplight from the hall spilled over the edge of Dorothy's quilt. Maybe she found what she was looking for, he said. In the weeks that followed, Dorothy drifted in and out of lucidity. On her good days she sat with Ethan in the sunroom, telling stories about the war years, about Evelyn, about the tiny church they'd once rebuilt with their own hands. Sometimes she'd forget mid-sentence, and Ethan would gently guide her back, finishing what she'd meant to say. Sharon often found them that way, 2 generations apart, sharing tea and silence, as if time had folded in on itself. Spring slipped quietly into summer. Dorothy's strength waned, but her calm deepened. She'd ask after Ethan's studies, after the foundation plans they'd started sketching together. And every time he left the room she'd whisper, "You remind me of her." One night she clasped his hand and said, "Tell Evelyn, if you ever see her again tell her I kept my promise. I never let the light go out." Ethan nodded, unable to speak. Dorothy Whitfield died on a Tuesday morning in late June. She went peacefully in her sleep, holding the thin blanket Ethan had wrapped around her shoulders that first night, exactly 16 months earlier. Sharon found her, called Ethan, and they sat together beside her bed, 2 people who had lost the same woman in different ways and loved her in the same one. The funeral was large. Dorothy had been a pillar of Austin's philanthropic community for decades, and everyone came to pay respects. But Ethan noticed that most of them had never visited while she was alive, never called, never checked on her. Sharon asked Ethan to give the eulogy. "You knew her heart at the end," she said softly. "You should be the one to speak." Ethan stood at the podium at the funeral home in Cedar Park, looking out at hundreds of faces, and talked about the night he'd met Dorothy, about the choice he'd made, about the 16 months that followed. "Dorothy Whitfield taught me that family isn't just the people you're born to," he said. "It's the people who refuse to abandon you. The people who choose you. She chose me when I was a stranger. She chose me when the world called me a fraud. She chose me every single day. And in choosing me she taught me how to choose others." The Lone Star Light Foundation exists because Dorothy understood that one moment of kindness can change everything. That seeing someone really seeing them can save a life. She saved mine. And through her legacy will save others. He paused, looking at the casket covered in blue bonnets. "My mother used to tell me that some things matter more than money. Dorothy proved that to me. She was the richest woman I ever knew, not because of her bank account, but because of her capacity to love, to forgive, to hope. I lost my mother twice, once to sickness, once to silence, but Dorothy and Sharon gave me something back. They gave me family, they gave me purpose, they gave me a future, and they taught me that home isn't a place, it's the moment when someone refuses to let you face the cold alone." When the service ended, Sharon found him outside by the hearse. She didn't speak at first, just took his hand and held it the way a mother holds a grown son's hand, steady without pity. "She'd be proud," she whispered. "And so am I." Ethan nodded, his voice breaking. "You don't have to. I already did," Sharon said. "You're mine now, and I'm yours. No paperwork needed." He pulled her into a quiet embrace, the kind that says everything words can't. The will reading happened the following week. As Sharon had warned, Dorothy had left a quarter of her estate to Ethan, enough that he'd never have to worry about rent or food again. But more importantly, she'd left him control of the Lone Star Light Foundation, with Sharon as co-director. "Make it matter," her letter to them read. "Help the ones who slip through the cracks. Be the person who stops. Always stop." Ethan read the letter and cried for the grandmother he'd known for such a short time, and for the mother now in Sharon, who had chosen to stay.
The next years unfolded quietly, like healing does. Sharon became both family and anchor, someone who made sure he ate, who left notes on his textbooks, who called him son without hesitation. Ethan started classes at UT Austin that fall, majoring in social work at first, but the foundation's stories, the young people who came to them sick, scared, untreated, pulled him toward medicine. By his second year he changed his major. If Dorothy could save me, he told Sharon, then maybe I can learn to save others. She only smiled and said, then that's exactly what you should do. Through late nights and long shifts, he kept the necklace his mother had left him hanging by his dorm lamp, its surface worn smooth by his thumb. It reminded him why he was there, not to escape his past, but to give it meaning. 4 years later, Ethan graduated from UT Austin with honors, bound for medical school. The Lone Star Light Foundation had grown into a network that reached across Texas, helping hundreds of young people find homes, education and care. On the anniversary of Dorothy's passing, Ethan and Sharon stood together at the old bus stop where it had all begun. They brought 2 cups of hot chocolate, the good kind now, not from a vending machine, and watched the city lights flicker on. She'd be proud of you, Sharon said. She'd be proud of us. Ethan answered. This is her legacy, ours, Mom's too. Sharon smiled, brushing away a tear. Then we keep it going. One life at a time. A cold wind passed down the street, and Ethan pulled his coat tighter. But this time, he had a coat that fit, a home that waited, and a mother beside him who had chosen him twice, once through Dorothy's love, and once by her own. He had everything his 17-year-old self had thought impossible. 12 years after that frozen February night, Ethan Bennett stood beneath the tall lights of the Houston Community Hall, where a newly built Lone Star Light Foundation Center had just opened its doors. It was the 8th in their network, modern, warm, full of the low hum of anticipation, and as applause faded from the opening speech, Ethan caught his reflection in the window. He was 29 now, older, steadier, and confident in ways his 17-year-old self could never have imagined. The sharp angles of hunger had softened into the calm lines of someone who had found purpose. Sharon Whitfield stood beside him, graceful in a navy dress, though she turned most of the day-to-day management over to younger staff to spend time with her own children. Yet tonight, she looked proud. The Houston Center would serve 60 young people, housing, education, counseling, a second chance for those who had run out of places to turn. It had been funded through the foundation's endowment and the generosity of strangers who believed that goodness could multiply, the way light travels farther in darkness. On stage a young woman stood behind the podium, her voice clear but trembling. Maya Rodriguez, 24, with dark eyes bright as memory, was one of the foundation's first clients. 11 years earlier, she had been living in her car. Now she wore a nurse's badge from Texas Children's Hospital. I was sleeping in parking lots when Lone Star Light found me, Maya said. I'd aged out of foster care. No family, no job, no plan. I thought I'd disappear quietly, like so many others do. But Ethan and Sharon saw me. They gave me a home, a reason to believe I mattered. Now I work with kids who are scared and alone, and when I look into their eyes, I tell them what this place told me. You're not where you start, you're what you do next. When someone finally gives you a chance. The crowd applauded. Some cried. Ethan's throat tightened. Pride, grief, gratitude, they braided together like threads of light through glass. After the ceremony, guests drifted toward the tables of coffee and kolaches, laughter echoing beneath the tall ceiling. Ethan lingered near the edge of the crowd. He always did. He preferred watching to being watched. That was when a young man approached him, tall, thin, shoulders tense beneath a worn jacket. He clutched a folder to his chest like armor. Mr. Bennett, he asked, voice soft, can I talk to you? Of course, Ethan said. What's your name? Michael Patterson. I'm 19. My school counselor said you might be able to help me. He found a quiet corner. The boy's story came out in bursts. Parents lost in a car accident, relatives who didn't want him, the slow slide into homelessness. He had finished high school with a 3.8 GPA, worked at fast food places, slept in shelters, saved what he could, but the weight was too much. I'm just so tired, Michael said. I want a chance to make something of myself. I just don't know how to do it alone. Ethan looked into his eyes and saw his own reflection. 17 again, cold, desperate, pedaling through that February night. "You're not alone anymore," Ethan said gently. "That's what we're here for. What do you want to study?" "Engineering," Michael said. "Sustainable housing. I want to build places where people don't have to choose between rent and food." Ethan felt his chest tighten, the same ache he'd felt the night Dorothy had first called him family. "That's a good dream," he said quietly. "Let's make it happen." An hour later, the folder was no longer a shield but a promise. Michael had a plan: housing in a group home, tutoring, job training, community college. When he left, his step was lighter. Sharon appeared beside Ethan with a coffee. "Another one saved," she said. "One more," he replied. "How many now?" "Across all centers, 347. She smiled. "Dorothy would be proud. So would Anna. They'd probably tell us we could still do more," Ethan said, and they both laughed. That evening, when the lights dimmed and the applause faded, Ethan drove to Cedar Park. The old Whitfield house had been donated years ago, turned into a home for young mothers and their children. The laughter that spilled from its windows was the sound Dorothy had once prayed for. But Ethan kept driving to the quiet rows of Memorial Park Cemetery, where Dorothy lay beside Patricia, and since 2 years ago, beside Anna. When he had finally earned enough, he'd arranged to move his mother's ashes from the city's public grave. Next to them stood a smaller headstone he'd placed himself, carved simply with the names Evelyn and Thomas Whitfield, Dorothy's oldest friends, whose lives had been lost to time but whose family had at last been found. Beneath the wide Texas sky, 4 generations of love and memory rested together. The wind moved softly through the oaks, as if whispering welcome home. Ethan set blue bonnets for Dorothy and white roses for Anna. He knelt, brushed dew from the stone, and spoke softly. "Hey Grandma, hey Mama, big day today. The new center's beautiful, you'd love it. We helped a boy named Michael, reminds me of me, 12 years ago, scared and alone, trying not to fall apart. Sometimes I still think about that night. What if I'd kept riding? If I'd chosen the job over you, Grandma, I might have never made it here. You saved me. And Mama, you taught me how to stop. You taught me to see people." He paused, eyes wet. "I'm getting married next month. Her name's Rachel. She's a social worker too. You'd both like her. She's got your strength, Grandma. Your heart, Mama." He smiled faintly. "Sharon's walking me down the aisle. I wish you could both be there, but maybe you already are." The wind stirred the leaves. A single one drifted down, landing softly on Dorothy's stone. Ethan picked it up, turned it between his fingers, and whispered, "Yeah, I hear you." He sat for a while longer, listening to the night settle, then touched both gravestones before heading back to his car. On the drive home his phone buzzed. Sharon's name glowed on the screen. "Hey," he said, "where are you?" "Just left the cemetery," Ethan answered, voice low. "Good," Sharon said after a pause, "then you're going to like this. The governor's office just emailed. They want to give Lone Star Light a community service award, big ceremony, media, the whole deal." Ethan smiled faintly. "That's something. They're renaming it too," she added, her voice catching. "The Dorothy Whitfield Legacy Award." Ethan stared out the windshield, the highway lights blurring. "She'd hate the attention. She'd love that it helps the cause," Sharon said gently. "You know she would." "Yeah," he murmured. "You're right." There was a long silence, comfortable, full of shared memory. "Ethan," Sharon said at last. "Yeah, we did good," she whispered. "You, me, Mom, Anna, we built something that matters." Ethan swallowed. "We did," he said. "And we're not done yet." "Not even close," Sharon replied, and he could hear her smile through the static. Ethan drove on through the Houston night. 12 years earlier, he'd pedaled these streets freezing and hungry. Now he drove home to warmth, to love, to purpose, all because he'd stopped. His mother had been right, some things mattered more than money. Dorothy had been right too, goodness returns, just not in the ways you expect. The Lone Star Light was spreading, farther and brighter, touching lives he'd never meet, and it would never go out. 23 years later, the 15th Lone Star Light Foundation Center opened under a cloudless Dallas sky. The building gleamed with glass and pale brick, sunlight glancing off the engraved bronze plaque above the door. The Dorothy and Anna Whitfield Center for Youth. Ethan Bennett stood on the stage, 50 now, silver streaking his hair. Rachel sat in the front row with their 3 teenage children, 2 daughters and a son, all adopted from the foster system. Their laughter drifted like the echo of something once lost and found again. The new center could house 120 young people, the largest they'd ever built. But what tightened Ethan's throat wasn't the scale, it was the man standing beside him at the podium. Michael Patterson, 42, a celebrated architect specializing in sustainable housing, had designed the building himself, refusing payment. His hair was threaded with gray, his eyes still bright with that same spark Ethan had seen in Houston decades ago. When Ethan found me 23 years ago, Michael said into the microphone, I was sleeping in shelters, ready to give up. He didn't just hand me money or a bed, he gave me belief that I mattered, that my dreams were valid, that someone cared whether I lived or not. I designed this place to feel like a home, not an institution. Because that's what Lone Star Light gave me, not charity, but family. That's Dorothy Whitfield's legacy, that's Anna Bennett's legacy, that's Ethan's gift. And it's what we'll keep giving to everyone who walks through these doors. Applause thundered through the hall. Ethan blinked hard. Pride and love swelled until he thought his chest might crack. After the ceremony, as visitors explored the bright new classrooms and dorms, Ethan lingered near the entrance, gazing at a bronze plaque. Dorothy Whitfield, Anna Bennett. They stopped, they cared, they lit the way. Rachel came to stand beside him. You okay? She asked. Just thinking about them, he said. About how one act of kindness became all of this. He gestured toward the laughter echoing in the halls. Dorothy would be 99 now. Mama would be 65. I wonder what they'd think. They'd think you did exactly what they taught you, Rachel said. You stopped, you helped, you made it matter. Ethan smiled faintly. That's all I ever wanted. Then from across the lobby he saw her, a thin teenage girl, maybe 16, clutching a backpack that looked far too light. Her eyes were wide and tired, the look of someone balancing on the edge of vanishing. Ethan excused himself and crossed the room. Hi, he said gently. I'm Ethan. Welcome to Lone Star Light. Is this your first time here? She nodded, silent. Do you need anything? I need help, she whispered. I don't have anywhere to go. Ethan felt the years collapse, the bus stop, the freezing wind, the trembling hands of a stranger who had saved him. You're not alone anymore, he said softly. Come on, let's get you somewhere warm. The girl hesitated, then followed him through the hallways filled with framed photographs, hundreds of faces, hundreds of stories that had begun in fear and ended in light. As they walked, Ethan felt the gentle press of something unseen, a hand on his shoulder, the warmth of memory. Dorothy's steady presence, his mother's quiet strength, the love that had never really left. He opened a door to a sunlit common room, where volunteers waited with cocoa and blankets. Start here, Ethan said to the girl. Tomorrow we'll make a plan. You're safe now. She looked up, eyes shining. Why are you helping me? She asked. You don't even know me. Ethan smiled. His voice came out steady, the same words he had once lived by. Because someone helped me once, when I needed it most, he said. And because you matter. You always did. The girl nodded, a flicker of something, maybe hope, crossing her face. Ethan watched her sit with the volunteers, the steam from the cocoa curling upward like a prayer. He turned toward the window. Outside, dusk was falling over Texas, the sky brushed in pale orange. He thought of the night that had started it all, the cold, the hunger, the decision to stop. One small act that had rippled outward for decades. Home wasn't a place, it was the moment someone refused to let you face the cold alone, and that moment was eternal. The Lone Star Light spread on, touching life after life, generation after generation, and it would never ever go out.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.